What is up, 5th grade? Mr. G here, another episode of Mr. G's Math Videos. In today's episode, we are going to be exploring the standard algorithm when we are dividing with decimals. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so standard algorithm to divide decimals. We've got in our first example 17 and 40 hundredths, and we want to divide that into 4 equal parts. So we are going to be using the same exact strategy that we learned when we were dividing whole numbers. Remember our acronym, mother, sister, brother, rover. That stands for multiply, subtract, bring down. Multiply, subtract, bring down. And if there's a remainder, we want to remember to bring that remainder up. So we're going to set up our problem exactly how we did as when we were dividing with whole numbers. We have our bracket, our total goes on the inside, and our part goes on the outside. So our very first step is how many 4s go into 1? 0. So then we ask ourselves, well, how many 4s go into 17? There are 4 4s. 4 times 4 is 16. So we're going to subtract that out. We're left with 1, and then we bring down the 4. So now we have 14. Now here's where it's slightly different when we're dividing by decimals. We want to bring the decimal point from 17.40 straight up into our quotient. Okay, so that is the big difference when we're dividing by decimals. Everything else is staying the same right now. So we bring the decimals straight up, and now we're going to continue dividing like normal. How many 4s go into 14? There are 3. 4 times 3 is 12. So I'm going to subtract 12. That's going to give me a remainder of 2. And then I'm going to drop down my last place value, the 0. So now I have 20. And then again, ask myself, how many 4s go into 20? That is 5. Multiply it out. Subtract 20. And then we have a remainder of 0. So 17.40 hundredths divided by 4 is 4 and 35 hundredths. So when the decimal is in the total, it's fairly easy. We divide like normal, and we just bring our decimal point up to the top. Okay, let's take a look at another example. 4.8 divided by 2. Again, our decimal is in the total, and we are dividing by a whole number. So our total is our dividend. The divisor is a whole number, 2. That's just a part, and we are looking for the quotient, the missing part. So again, multiply, subtract, bring down. Set up our bracket. Get our hashtag going with all our 2's. And we start the process. How many 2's go into 4? There are 2 groups of 2. We multiply it out. 2 times 2 is 4. Then we subtract it. That leaves us with 0. We bring the 8 down, and then we repeat the process. How many groups of 2 go into 8? There are 4 groups. So 4 goes in our quotient. We multiply it out. We subtract it. And we have 0 left. And again, the only difference is we are bringing up that decimal point into our quotient. All right, so we've looked at 2 examples where the decimal is in the total. Let's look at an example where the decimal is in our divisor. So here's an example of that type of problem. Now, this strategy is going to be slightly different than the ones we've been doing. So now we have a whole number as our dividend or total, and we are dividing it by a decimal in the divisor. Now, if you remember in our last video where we talked about when we divide by a decimal, and there's a decimal in the divisor like there is in this problem, our number is going to get bigger. So if I have 8 wholes and I'm making groups of 2/10, how many groups of 2/10 fit into 8 holes? It's going to be a larger number than 8. So we're going to set up our problem. 8 goes in the bracket, 2/10 goes on the outside. Now here's where it changes. We do not want a decimal in our divisor. So we need to make the divisor a whole number by moving or shifting the decimal to the right. So we're going to shift it over one place value to the right. Instead of 2/10 now, it's going to become a 2. If we shift the divisor, we also have to shift the dividend. So we are going to move the decimal in the 8 one place to the right, because we moved it one place to the right in the divisor, and it is now going to be 80. So we are looking at 80 divided by 2. And now we're just going to divide like normal. So how many groups of 2 go into 8? There are 4. We multiply that out, and then we subtract 8. We have a remainder of 0. We bring down our other 0. And how many groups of 2 go into 0? Well, the answer is 0. So our quotient is 40. So if I were to imagine decimal grids, and I have 8 decimal grids lined up, and I start making groups of 2/10, I would be able to make 40 groups of 2/10 in my 8 decimal grids. So again, when we divide by a decimal, our answer is going to be a larger number. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at one more example where the dividend is the whole number and the divisor is the decimal. So we have 12 divided by 32 hundredths. So again, imagine 12 hundredths grids, and we are going to make groups of 32 hundredths. How many groups would we be able to make in those 12 holes? All right, so we're going to set up our problem. 12 goes on the inside, 32 hundredths goes on the outside. Now, again, we don't want 32 hundredths as our divisor. We need to make it a whole number. So we are going to be shifting our decimal 2 places to the right. That means 32 hundredths now becomes 32. Now, if we do that for the divisor, we have to do it for the dividend as well. We are going to shift it 2 places to the right. Now, since there are no place values there, we need to fill it in with our placeholders. So there's 1 shift to the right, we add a 0, 2 shifts to the right, and there's our decimal point. So now we have 1,200 divided by 32. And then again, now we're just going to be dividing like normal. So I'm going to set my hashtag up. There's all my 32s, and I'm just going to start the division process. So how many groups of 32 go into 1? 0. How many groups of 32 go into 12? 0. How many groups of 32 go into 120? So we look at our hashtag. The closest I can get is 96. That's 3 groups. So I put a 3 in my quotient and I multiply it out. 32 times 3 is 96. So I'm going to subtract that. If I do a little bit of regrouping, I have 4 and a 2 in the tens place. I'm going to bring down my 0. So now I have 240. How many groups of 32 go into 240? So I look at my hashtag, and the closest I can get is 224. That is going to be 7 groups. Now, again, here's where it slightly changes. I want to bring that decimal point straight up into my quotient. So I have 37 point something. And then I'm going to finish multiplying. 32 times 7 was 224. So I'm going to subtract that out. I have 6 left. Now, I'm going to add a 0 in the tens place because I still need to keep dividing. I have 16 left. Okay. So I'm going to add that 0 as a placeholder, and then I'm going to drop it down into my 16, and now it's going to be 160. And so now again, I go back to my hashtag and I look, where's 160? How many groups of 32 does it take to make 160? And I can see that it's going to be 5 groups of 32. So I add 5 to my quotient. I multiply it out. It's going to be 160. I subtract it, and that's going to leave me with a remainder of 0. Okay. So now what's different from this, from what we've been doing? We would have gotten 37 and we would have put a remainder of 16 and we would have stopped there. However, when we're working with decimals and we learn to keep dividing, we are now going to be adding a 0 as a placeholder after the decimal point, drop that down, and we're going to continue the division process until we get a remainder of 0, or we get a number that just continually repeats over and over and over. And that is how we divide using the standard algorithm with decimals. So our quotient was 37.5. All right. So you've seen a few examples where we've had a whole number divided by a decimal, and then we've had decimals divided by a whole number. Okay, the process is very similar. There's some slight differences depending on where that decimal is. So I'm going to go ahead and give you one of each to practice on your own. The first one, 78.4 divided by 14. This one's fairly easy when the decimal is in the total. We just divide like normal and remember to bring the decimal point straight up into the quotient. And I'm going to give you a little harder one, a little bit more of a challenge, where the decimal is in the dividend, and so, or the divisor, excuse me, where we're doing a whole number divided by a decimal. All right, go ahead and pause the video. See if you can work these out on your own, and then when you're done, unpause them, and then we'll go through the answers together. All right, welcome back. Let's go ahead and take a look at this first example, 78.4 divided by 14. We set it up normal. We have our hashtag. We list out all our 14s. And we're just going to divide like normal. How many 14s go into 78? Well, the closest I can get is 70. That's going to be in the 5th position. So I put a 5 up there. And you'll notice I brought my decimal straight up. So it's 5 point something. 14 times 5 is going to be 70. I subtract it out. I'm left with 8. I drop down the 4, and then I repeat the process. How many groups of 14 go into 84? I see that there are 6 groups going to 84, so I add the 6. I multiply it out, and then I subtract 84, and I'm left with 0. So I can stop right there. I don't need to add another 0 into the total because I have a remainder of 0. So my answer is 5.6. All right, in this more challenging one, I have 5 divided by 2/10. And again, I just want to kind of visualize what this is going to look like. Imagine having 5 decimal grids, 5 holes, and I'm going to be making groups of 2/10. And all I need to do is figure out how many groups of 2/10 fit into 5 holes. So we set up our bracket. Now, when we have this type of division, we do not want a decimal in the divisor. So we are going to have to shift it over one place so that 2/10 now becomes a 2. And if we do this in the divisor, we also have to do it in the dividend, the total. So I shift it over once and I add a 0 for my placeholder. Now I have 50 divided by 2, and now I'm just going to divide like normal. Got my hashtag for all my 2's, and then I just ask myself, how many groups of 2 go into 5? That's 2 groups. 2 times 2 is 4. That leaves me with 1. I bring the 0 down. Now I'm going to repeat the process. How many groups of 2? How many groups of 2 go into 10? 5 groups of 2. Put a 5 in my quotient, multiply it out, subtract 10, and I have a remainder of 0. So I do not need to bring my decimal up and add another 0 because I have a remainder of 0. So my answer is going to be 25. All right, guys, that is going to wrap it up for our video. You may have to go back and watch this once or twice to kind of get used to dividing with the standard algorithm, because you can see the steps are slightly different depending on where that decimal is. If you have a decimal in the total or the dividend, it's really easy. All you have to do is divide like normal and bring the decimal straight up into your quotient. If the decimal is in the divisor, like that second example, then you have to make it a whole number. We never want to have a decimal in the divisor, so we have to shift the decimal however many places until we get that whole number. The key is remembering to also shift the decimal in your dividend or total. That's the key for that strategy. All right, guys, I appreciate you watching this video. Keep on practicing this. This is not something you're going to be picking up in the first go around. This is going to take you a few examples. It'll take you some more practice problems, but I promise you'll get the hang of it the more you practice. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Drop any comments in the videos. Are they helping you? Are you finding these useful? I appreciate all the comments and interacting with you guys on our channel. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, Manta Rays, keep on mathin'.